self is deplored in really Krishnamurti philosophy, and it is philosophy. It's a bit like the Buddha. You feel he escaped from theosophy, having felt it was inadequate, presumably, and come up with a philosophy that has no God, no handleable concept of the perfect, and therefore achieves or doesn't achieve the perfect. In fact, seems to achieve annihilation of self, and presents me with being a person of lack of happiness, lack of joy, lack of hope, lack of devotion. The only answer to the difficulties of life being no life, no self, no being, really. It's as if I can't see the satisfactory way, so I shall wipe out the existence, which will wipe out the problem with it. But I am come that you might have life, life abundant, life eternal. All I know is I'm drawn much more strongly to the Jesus story. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. The peculiarity of Krishnamurti is, along with, I think, the same of Buddhism, there's no explanation of our dilemma of being. It becomes a dilemma that's dismissed as a misunderstanding. That solves that one, so to speak. But it puts nothing hopeful, therefore, in its place, because there is no hope, there is no being. There's no being to hope. I think that's what, in other words, Krishnamurti has turned the chief prophet of theosophy back to a lonely, secular philosophy, acceptable to the modern age in the same way as Buddhism seems to be. For it comes into a world with no hope. Instead of what Judaism does, which brings some hope, but some are judged as failing, of course, permanently apparently, condemned accordingly. Whereas the great Jesus story, well, many are called, I take it further than that, I suppose. I'm further than the Jesus story. All are not only called, but predestined, if you like. Because of God. I still think it's not safe to have killed God by philosophy. It doesn't seem to result in a happy world. On the contrary, we could say that the world is philosophy without God. and a very unhappy place. And I am come that you might have life, abundant life, and what you associate as being the goodness of life, which is not the annihilation of self, but probably an expansion of self where we all live in harmony, communion, eternally, and not presuming that we are self-created from nothing, but rather by the grace of God come into being, our God, a wonderful God, a God that personifies what we truly seem to value. And we find out here in this classroom of existence, in what we might term the world of the transitory, the good and evil, good and bad, change and uncertainty. We enter into that eternal fullness. And all I can say is that the practice of such belief seems to bring great reward in this life, if not the next too, and the next being very good. By such training and perfection as is conceivably going on here. This is my hope. And this hope brings a better life here, and the possibility of not having to come back, but have something far better. And that seems to lift my life here greatly, in joy and hope and peace, blessedness, creativity, kindness, compassion, care, love, devotion. Devotion is the epitome of attachment, the best, as opposed to an attachment to annihilation, what we understand to be death here. And fear might be permanent, but for the grace and goodness of God, as depicted in such myths and stories, a great blessing to us. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. Yes, see, Krishnamurti amounts to an advance of philosophy on Buddhism that strips it of its ethical concern and makes it truly secular, truly the philosophy of a world without God and without us. Those that is to hear, let them hear. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. Why? Well, I suppose that we all stay here or return to something like here until we can hear. Do you want a short childhood or a long one? I think I'd like to get to heaven as soon as possible, really. Most efficient way. And perhaps you need ears to hear what Jesus says, especially in something like John 17, says Marshall. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.